G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome back for some more Borderlands, the pre-sequel. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a guide to Nisha, the Lawbringer, and what pistols you should be using with her when you're playing a dual pistol wielding spec. So, for those of you guys who are a little bit less familiar, that is a one for each of your style spec, using the fan, the hammer tree, often combined with Riflewoman, with lots of damage boosting things, showdown boosting things, and hip firing boosting things. So, basically the fast moving, high DPS glass cannony style niches that are ever so popular at the moment, and with good reason. They're super effective and super fun. So, in this video I'm going to be dispelling some of people's love for Jakobs pistols in particular, because I know they're extremely popular, and I love Jakobs as a manufacturer as well, but they just are not the optimal pistol for this build, and I'll be explaining why. So straight off the bat, I'm going to come out and say that the two best manufacturers for Nisha for this style of spec are Vladoff and Hyperion. These are the ones you should be looking out for. I get very excited when I see a purple Vladoff drop, and you should be too. And then you should be doing some DPS calculations and working out whether it's actually any good or not. The reason for this is it's all about damage and fire rate. It's about how many bullets you put out and how much damage those bullets do. That is essential. That's all you need for Nisha. Now, I'll kind of get into why, even though Jakobs has very good damage and fire rate, why it's not the best setup in a little bit. But first, I'm going to go over just the basic idea of how to do a DPS calculation and how to work out whether a pistol has good DPS. Then we'll talk about some of the other things. So, I'm going to bring up my handy little calculator here. You guys should always have this handy when you're playing a loot-based game like this. Get that calculator out, and if you're still in school, pay attention in math class. I sure wish I did, because the games would be a lot easier, but I'm pretty terrible at math. But I can still work this out. So, we'll start off with this Hyperion pistol, actually, because, wait, no, the Hyperion is also a ×2. That's fine, it doesn't matter all that much. So, this particular pistol is a double. It shoots 2 bullets per shot, essentially. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take the base damage, which is 2,057. We're going to multiply it by 2, since it's a double. So, we end up with 4,114 damage per shot. Then we're going to multiply that by our fire rate, which is 6.8. This gives us a 28,000 DPS pistol, 27,975 DPS pistols. That's what our damage per second is. Now, accuracy, reload speed, magazine size, these are all relatively important, but as Nisha, you actually get benefits for reloading, and you reload very quickly anyway, and magazine size, reload rate, not as important. Accuracy can be a little bit of important for when you're not in Showdown, but you should be spending most of your time when you're using pistols in Showdown. If you're not in Showdown, you should probably switch to a laser, or you should be a little bit more conservative, or getting a little bit closer. So the accuracy concerns is not a big one, even though this is a fairly low accuracy pistol just here, and the recoil is horrendous on it. That's not necessarily a bad thing for Nisha, because she has a built-in aimbot. So we're not worrying about that, we're just worrying about DPS as much as possible. For a comparison, we can take a look at this other Hyperion purple pistol I have here, and we can go 2297 times 2, and then that is 4,594, and then we can times that by the fire rate, and this one will be a little bit lower, quite a bit lower actually. It's almost 10k lower because of the lower fire rate. So this is pretty much always going to be the case. Hyperion's nearly always going to be lower DPS than Vladoff, unless you just get a really good Hyperion. And the reason for this is that Hyperion trades damage for accuracy. Hyperion are extremely accurate, and they get more accurate the more you fire them. So Hyperion are a nice balance because they're higher damage per shot, which means they're more ammo efficient, and you will run out of ammo as Nisha. But their kind of lower damage is offset by accuracy, which means you get a bit more effectiveness out of them when you're not in Showdown. So for example, with the Vladoff pistols, we're kind of like struggling to maintain an accurate firing, right? When we're in Showdown, it doesn't matter. All of those bullets will connect when we're in Showdown, so that's not a concern at all. But with Hyperion, when we're not in Showdown, we kind of get the effectiveness of being super freaking accurate. So Hyperion are great because although they're not as good in Showdown, they're good outside of Showdown, so it kind of balances out all right. Now probably third and fourth tied with each other are probably Tediore and Scav. Both of these pistols you should not be favoring over Hyperion or Vladoff ever, because the damage is just going to be lower, but they are okay in a pinch. If you can't find yourself a good Vladoff or Hyperion, you can use Tediore and Scav, and they're going to work quite well. So, with that out of the way, with this idea of, DPS out of the way, let's talk about the manufacturers that you should not be using as a dual-wielding Nisha, and why exactly. So these are Jakobs and Dahl. Now, Dahl is a bit of a troll, right? Because you look at a Dahl pistol, now this is a white pistol, but it's still really good, and that's because it has very, very high damage and very high fire rate on the information sheet, on the information panel here. The 14 fire rate's insane. That's higher than I think you can possibly ever get with a Vladoff pistol, even though Vladoff can go exceptionally high. The counter to this is that it's a click-to-fire gun. It has burst fire while zoomed, which is nice, but not really that helpful for Nisha. Now the same sort of goes for Jakobs. Jakobs also has a very high fire rate and extremely high damage on the sheet, and the DPS, if you do the DPS calculations for either of these guns, will oftentimes, if you have the same rarity, be way better than Vladoff and Hyperion. So the reason for that is, again, it's a click-to-fire sort of gun. So it has the same problems just there. Now, why is this a problem? Like, that's not much of a problem. You just click faster. The damage is really high. People love Jakobs. I love Jakobs. Everyone loves Jakobs. But why does this not work for Nisha? Now, the reason for this is this dual wield. What this dual wield skill does. Let's actually break down what this skill does. So this skill does a few different things. It gives a few different benefits. Firstly, it doubles the amount of ammo you have on hand at any one time. So if I'm using a Jakobs pistol, this is a fairly powerful boost, right? 8 bullets per clip on a Jakobs pistol. But with 2 of them, that ups me to 16. So I'm essentially doubling my clip size, right? And then it also gives you the effect of having less downtime while reloading. So if I'm reloading one of my guns, so I can do that probably by wearing one of them down just here, you'll start reloading one before you reload the other one, and sometimes you'll reload one when you're not reloading the others. This can happen sometimes if you're doing a bit of hip firing, and then that one's reloading, you're still able to fire while that one. That's pretty handy sometimes when you're in showdown and things like that, but that's only a minor point compared to the most major point. So we have, just to go over the positives again, the positives are double clip size and less downtime while reloading. Now the negative for Jakobs pistols and the positive for fully auto pistols like Vladoff and Hyperion are that you get double fire rate. With this dual wielding you get double fire rate. Now this does not happen with a Jakobs pistol because each time I click my mouse, I only fire once. I don't fire with each pistol. However, if I click and hold, I fire at the exact same time. Both auto pistols fire at the same time, and you can see that in effect really well sometimes when even the shots will even sync up sometimes when you start firing. But either way, with auto pistols you're doubling your fire rate. With the Jakobs pistols you're actually not. You're actually not gaining any increase in fire rate, unless you're using turbo fire on a turbo fire controller, or you have a click macro set up with an insane click macro. But I'm talking about within the actual mechanics of the game. So if you kind of want to use external applications to kind of cheat your way into making Jakobs work with this sort of build, then you can do that. If you want to do that, you can do that. If you can manage to cap the attack speed on a Jakobs using a click macro, then you're going to increase your fire rate by having 2 of them. But for any normal person clicking as fast as you could possibly click, even as fast as Superman could click, you're not going to get any increase in attack speed by dual wielding with Jakobs. So you're essentially wasting that huge benefit of dual wielding. The ammo, the magazine size, and the reload things are only minor benefits in comparison to the sheer amount of bullets you put out. So for absolutely maximizing your DPS, we're looking at auto pistols like Vladoff and Hyperion. And you can actually look at it, it's like 28,000 DPS for a single pistol. You just double that with a Vladoff to work out your DPS for dual wielding with Nisha on Vladoffs. However, if I do the same calculation for Jakobs, it's still just the DPS for the one pistol. So it's not actually doubling your DPS. So it's when you kind of put up the DPS side by side, then you'd probably be looking at for a really good Jakobs something like 30k DPS, with you being able to fire as fast as the fire cap rate, which is not really very likely. But anyway, let's just pretend. And then you stack up the DPS with dual wielding Vladoffs, which you're getting something like 60 something K DPS instead. You're able to essentially double that. So hopefully that explains this for you guys and sort of puts you on the right track for which pistols to use as Nisha. You'll have a great time once you switch to auto pistols, I promise it, guys, if you haven't been doing so. But above all else, if you enjoy using Jakobs pistols anyway, and you feel like a badass using revolvers, dual hands, which is awesome and it's very thematic for the Lawbringer class, then go ahead and do that. You guys should do whatever's most fun for you. But if you do want to go for that efficiency, and if you do enjoy that efficiency, make sure to use them auto pistols. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.